Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Cahill. I work in Disability and Access Services in the Division of Student Life. And our team does a number of things, including we provide consulting on accessibility and usability to MIT departments, labs, and centers. We also do assistive technology consults with MIT students and staff. So just wanted to make sure everyone knows about us and what we do in our services. So captioning falls within the realm of a larger group of things called web accessibility. Web accessibility is means that websites, documents, communications are all usable by a wide range of people, including those with disabilities. And when authors of these communications ensure that their work meets accessibility standards, they'll be usable by everybody. So about 15 to 20% of the world's population has some form of a disability. And at MIT, since diversity is such a big part of MIT's identity, we want to make sure that we include people with disabilities in the work that we do, whether it is communicating with the outside world, whether it is working with students or attracting students who have disabilities to MIT, and also attracting faculty and staff and retaining them once they're here. So when our digital communications are accessible, that means that people can actually use all the tools that we have available. So for instance, if you are a student and you want to make sure that you're able to read stuff about the admissions process, you can read blogs by students. If you want to request your grades, or you want to engage in any of the things that students do online, which is so much these days, we want to make sure that as a student you have the ability to do that. And the same is true for staff. So we want to make sure that staff are able to use all of the tools that are available to any employee here, including the application process, in order to apply to work here and then use all the tools available that they need in their jobs. So accessibility isn't just something that one office takes care of. It's the responsibility of everyone across the Institute. So if you create documents, if you maintain or create websites, if you publish information on social media or create videos, or you arrange events or send mass emails or email invitations, then it's really important to make sure that your work is accessible. So narrowing it down to captioning, Anthony already went through a number of the terms of the agreement with NAD and explained a little bit about some of the standards. So I'm going to go into a little more detail about that. So captioning divides the transcript into chunks of text and time codes each chunk to synchronize with the audio of a video. And they're usually, as many of you have, I'm sure, seen, captions are overlaid normally at the bottom of a video screen so viewers can follow along with the video and the captions at the same time. Closed captions need to depict speech, identify speakers, but they also need to account for sounds that are not apparent visually and are needed to understand the content of the video. And they also need to be accurate. So the accuracy rates we've heard are normally around 99 to 99.5%. And of course, that's a hard statistic to reach, but there's a lot of tools out there that include a lot of quality control to make sure that that happens. So obviously, the main audience for captions are deaf and hard of hearing users, but they're very beneficial to people in other groups, including for whom English is a second language, people who might watch TV in noisy or quiet locations, such as an office, such as a bar, a gym, anything like that. It can help all listeners if the audio track itself is not of high quality or the volume is low. And there's also research, the link provided below, that shows that people comprehend the content better when captions are provided. So, of course, the main issues here are the how-tos. So there are a number of ways to caption video. One is to send it to a third-party provider, such as 3Play Media or rev.com, and there's a number of others. The other thing is if it's a YouTube video and YouTube does auto captions, you can edit those auto captions in order to make them accurate and contain all the correct information. Or you can manually create captions using some online tools that are provided. So as far as best practices regarding captioning, the greater accuracy that is very important, because if people are getting captions that are full of errors, then they're not really getting the complete understanding of the material that someone not needing captions would receive. They need to be consistent, so there needs to be consistency in the style and presentation of the captions. They need to be clear, so they need to represent whatever's going on in the audio, identify speakers and non-speech information. They need to be readable, so the time that the actual captions are on the screen, there's a minimum amount of time that is ideal for most readers to be able to absorb that information. They need to be synchronized with the audio and they're not obscured by anything on the screen so that people are unable to read them. And they need to be equal. In other words, the meaning needs to completely preserve the meaning intention and intention of the original material. And since Barra's going to be sharing these slides later on, there's a link at the bottom of this screen to some more details about what captioning is and what quality captioning includes. Excuse me. So as far as outsourcing captions, one of the companies that many MIT departments already use is 3Play Media, which was started by a number of Sloan graduates. It provides captions, interactive transcripts, descriptive video, which is a second audio track that contains visual information for blind users. And that is a different service and not part of today's talk. And an easy to use portal for many MIT departments. So the prices per minute vary with 3Play depending on what the turnaround time is. So it can go anywhere from $1.90 a minute up to $3 a minute, depending on how much of a turnaround you need. 3Play Media, which Chris Brewer will demonstrate later on in this talk, also has a really nice portal on their website that you can sign into and upload your videos to as well. You can also edit your own captions. So if you get your captions back and there's something you need to change or fix, there's a tool available on their website that's pretty user-friendly. Other captioning providers include one you may have heard of as well, rev.com. Their prices are lower. They were $1 a minute. They just recently went up to $1.25 a minute. They do 24-hour turnaround for videos that are under 30 minutes, but I would encourage you to check for the accuracy of the captions when you get it back. As Anthony also mentioned, we are in the process of working with MIT procurement to identify some other preferred captioning and transcript vendors that will have competitive pricing so that we can offer MIT departments a greater range of different vendors. Okay, so YouTube, a lot of departments use YouTube as their video repositories. Auto captions from YouTube are not sufficiently accurate to use for captions. The reason for that is you may have noticed that they are not, there's no punctuation in them. There's no speaker identification. Words can get mangled, or especially names or places. So that would not reach a level of accuracy great enough to suffice for captions. So normally once you upload a video to YouTube, the captions are automatically added to your video if the audio quality is sufficient. So what you want to make sure is that once you get the captions back, you can edit them to correct the errors, to add punctuation, and then take the caption file and re-upload that so you have accurate captions. Chris is also going to demonstrate that in his demo. The other thing you can do is if you already have a timed transcript of the audio, such as an SRT file, you can edit that and upload it directly to YouTube as well. So there's a number of do-it-yourself captioning tools out there. These are all, the first two are free. The third one, Caption Maker, I believe charges, I think it depends on the functionality. So there's Amara, there's Cadet, which is from WGBH, and then there's Mac Caption or Caption Maker. And I think Chris is going to demonstrate one of these as well. So Chris will show you some of these tools that I've described for later on in this demonstration. I just want to point you, once you get these slides, that our team has a website with accessible captioning and description information. The general captioning guidelines that I spoke about earlier are also linked here. And if you have any questions for our team, we can be reached at accessibility@mit.edu. And there's also a link to our team's webpage as well.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Why don't we take about 5 minutes of questions before we move on to the next topic?
Okay, so I'm looking at the questions and I'm trying to find some that are specific to Kathy, and I think some of the top questions may not be specifically for Kathy, but let me see. Here's a quick one, Kathy, you may be able to answer. What about videos that contain content but no audio?
That's a great question. It's very important to just include a bracket at the beginning that says no audio track or something like that. Because there are a number of videos that very often have, they may display things, but they may not actually have an audio piece of information.
Great, thank you. And another one along those lines, if a primary language in a video is not English, do we have an obligation to include captions in the primary language and in English?
That's a good question. I don't know. Anthony or Dahlia, do you have a thought about that?
So certainly through NAD, we have no obligation to translate if we weren't already planning to translate. So I think, I don't know that this topic, I remember it coming up, Anthony, when our conversations with NAD, but that's one we can take back and think about. I don't see how we would have an obligation to provide translated captions.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the obligation really is to provide equivalent access. And if folks without, who can hear the audio, hear Spanish, then I think the caption should be in Spanish. And if they can hear English, then the caption should be in English. But if it's translated for one group, it should be translated for the other group. So we should just be providing equivalent access.
Great, thank you. And I did hear that Clayton Hainsworth joined us, and we do actually have a question for you, Clayton, if Great, I see you there. So this question is just about MIT Audiovisual Services. And do you offer captioning, and can we assume the captioning meets the needed standards?
Yeah, absolutely. So really quick, just a point of clarification, we are not audiovisual, we're MIT Video Productions. Audiovisual is also a group that provides some additional services such as stream text for live events. For what we also do is provide like live webcasting, and our captions are ADA compliant, along with our captioning services that we provide after the event is over and sort of for edited video content. Typically we use 3Play, Rev, and some other vendors to get that done. But yeah, all of those meet ADA compliance.
Great, thanks, Clayton. And then one more, Kathy, I think maybe you could answer this, or I'm not sure who the right person, but to talk a little bit more, maybe it'd be Anthony, about the accessibility link. People are just wondering a little bit more about where will the link go to a central page where people can request captioning, and also does the accessibility link need to be on channels such as YouTube, Vimeo, SoundCloud, etc.? So maybe that's Anthony. Yeah.
Yeah, the answer is yes to all of those questions. The link will send folks who click on it to the central accessibility page that we are developing as contemplated under the agreement. And that's where we will have a central request mechanism for folks to say, hi, I'd like you to request XYZ video. I'd like to make XYZ video captioned. And the obligation to post a link on a covered web page also applies to YouTube channels, Vimeo channels. There's no requirement in the settlement as to where that link goes, but it should go, somewhere where it's visible. Folks can find it. And in YouTube, for example, I think there's like a little section on the landing page for a channel where you have a cluster of links, and that might be a good place to put a link on YouTube, but it does need to be on the YouTube channels as well.
Oh, you're on mute, Dana.
Sorry, yeah. Anthony, if you could just stay on. There was two other quick questions I think you might be able to answer. One was just about sort of the 7-day rule. And when you say act on request within 7 days, by the time you get the captioning file out, et cetera. So does this mean 7 business days, or can you give any more detail on that?
It is 7 business days. We certainly tried to get more time than the 7 business days, recognizing that it would take a little bit of time to get the request to the appropriate content owner, for the content owner to decide whether he or she was going to caption it themselves, send it out to 3Play, get the file back, etc. 7 business days was the compromise position that we got to by the end of the negotiations. And that just means that when we're developing this central mechanism, we're going to have to get the requests out to the appropriate content owners as soon as possible, so that we are giving folks as much time to make the decisions they need to make and get the files captioned as soon as possible.